Memorial didn't lose to Centennial 48-0. They actually lost something like 38-4. I definitely believe that Hunter Metcalf knew who he was, and he approached him because he was upset about that game.
You can feel the entire courtroom freeze as a teenager takes the stand. Not just any teenager, but a fellow student who was there at Kuykendall Stadium on the day Austin Metcalf was stabbed. The tension is unlike anything heard so far in this trial. Reporters lean forward, pens ready, while both families brace themselves. For the first time, a student who witnessed the fight directly is about to tell the court what he saw. And when he begins to speak, his words slice through the silence. "I saw Karmelo Anthony pull the knife." Gasps ripple across the gallery. It's not just what the witness says, but how he says it. His voice shakes, but his account is detailed. He describes the altercation step by step, from the shouting match between Karmelo and Austin, to the crowd of students circling closer, to the split second when the confrontation turned deadly. For months, speculation has swirled about whether this was self-defense or an unprovoked attack. But now, in front of the jury, the student describes it as intentional. He claims Austin tried to back away, but Karmelo pressed forward, making the stabbing unavoidable. The Anthony family shifts uneasily, their defense attorney objecting repeatedly, but the judge allows the testimony to continue. The Metcalfs, seated just rows away, sit in quiet anguish as the young witness recounts the final moments of their son's life. Every detail feels like reopening a wound that never healed. For the jury, this changes everything. This isn't forensic evidence or speculation from police. It's raw, first-hand testimony from a peer, someone who stood just feet away when Austin Metcalf collapsed to the track. And as the courtroom absorbs the weight of those words, it becomes clear the student's testimony could tip the balance of the entire trial. The defense wastes no time in trying to dismantle the credibility of the student witness. You watch as Karmelo Anthony's attorney stands, pacing slowly in front of the jury, before fixing his eyes on the teenager. His voice is calm but sharp. "You were scared that day, weren't you? The crowd was chaotic. You couldn't see everything clearly, could you?" The strategy is clear. Paint the witness as unreliable, just another shaken teenager overwhelmed by the chaos of that April afternoon. But the witness doesn't crumble as expected. Instead, he leans into the microphone, his voice steadier now. He admits there was panic, that dozens of students were shouting, that teachers were rushing forward. Yet he insists that his view was unobstructed, that he saw Karmelo holding the knife, and that Austin had his hands up as if trying to create distance. Each clarification lands heavily, forcing the jury to weigh the words of a peer against the polished objections of a seasoned attorney. The Anthony family shifts in their seats, visibly shaken by how firmly the student stands his ground. Meanwhile, the Metcalfs listen intently, tears welling as their son's final moments are relived, yet again, this time through the eyes of someone who was there. The emotional toll is evident, but for the prosecution, this testimony is priceless. The defense pivots again, pressing the idea of self-defense. "Isn't it possible," the attorney asks, "that you only caught part of the fight, that Austin could have been the aggressor?" But the witness doesn't budge. He shakes his head, stating clearly that Austin was retreating when the stabbing occurred. The courtroom murmurs, the jury scribbles notes, and the atmosphere turns electric. For the first time, it feels as though the case is being decided not by experts or investigators, but by the raw words of a student, someone with no agenda, no authority, just a painful memory etched into his mind. And whether the defense likes it or not, his testimony may prove impossible to shake. The student's testimony may have captured headlines this week, but it sits on top of a case that has already gripped Collin County for months. The story began on April 2, when 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony was arrested following the fatal stabbing of Austin Metcalf during a Frisco ISD track meet at Kuykendall Stadium. The confrontation, which unfolded in front of classmates, parents, and coaches, sent shockwaves through the community. A school sporting event meant to showcase discipline, teamwork, and youthful promise had suddenly turned into a crime scene. Just days after his arrest, Karmelo was charged with first-degree murder, a charge that carries the possibility of life in prison under Texas law. Because 17-year-olds are legally considered adults in the state, he was processed through the adult criminal justice system. rather than the juvenile courts. That decision alone elevated the case, ensuring that every move from then on would be scrutinized under the harshest legal light. On April 14, after intense debate, Karmelo was released from jail on a reduced bond. The court imposed strict conditions, placing him on house arrest while the case developed. For the prosecution, this arrangement gave them time to gather evidence and prepare for what would be a long legal battle. For the community, though, it was an unsettling reminder that the Hughes killer of a teenager was back outside, living at home while the victim's family mourned their son. In the months that followed, investigators pieced together witness statements, physical evidence, and digital records, eventually presenting their findings to a Collin County grand jury. That grand jury later issued a formal indictment, confirming that prosecutors had enough evidence to pursue the case at trial. District Attorney Greg Willis described the indictment as a step forward in a process that had to remain deliberate and principled, even amid public outrage. This background, the arrest, the indictment, and the strict house arrest conditions set the stage for the courtroom drama that now unfolds. And with every new revelation, from forensic evidence to emotional testimonies, the stakes for both families only grow higher. For the Metcalf family, every development in this case reopens a wound that may never truly heal. Austin Metcalf was just 17 years old, a student, an athlete, and, by all accounts, a young man with a future that stretched far beyond the track. His father, Jeff Metcalf, has become the family's voice, speaking publicly in moments of awe, pain, and determination. After the indictment was announced, Jeff told reporters, "I fully believe justice will be served for Austin. I look forward to the trial, but it will never bring my son back." His words underlined the cruel reality. No matter what happens in the courtroom, the Metcalf's lives were permanently altered on that April afternoon. In the community, the tragedy continues to ripple. Parents of other students in Frisco ISD have expressed anger and fear, wondering how a violent confrontation could escalate to murder at what was supposed to be a safe school event. Vigils have been held in Austin's honor, with classmates gathering to light candles and share memories of a friend they described as funny, kind, and loyal. For many, the fact that the stabbing happened in front of peers makes the trauma even harder to bear. Students who witnessed the act have carried the weight of what they saw into classrooms, practices, and daily life, a constant reminder of how quickly innocence can be shattered. Local officials have also been under pressure. Calls for increased security at school events and better conflict resolution programs have grown louder. Some parents demand accountability, not just from the individuals involved, but from the institutions meant to protect their children. The sense of betrayal that a track meet, of all places, became the site of a killing has left scars across the district. Through it all, the Metcalfs remain at the center. Their grief is public, their pain visible each time they walk into the courtroom and sit just feet away from the boy accused of killing their son. They cannot escape the story, because for them, it is not just a headline or a trial. It is the ongoing reality of living without Austin. And, as the trial unfolds, every testimony and every piece of evidence reminds them of the future he will never have. While the Metcalf family grieves openly, the Anthony family has taken a very different role, that of quiet but steadfast defense. From the beginning, Karmelo's attorney, Mike Howard, has emphasized one central theme: self-defense. In his video statement following the indictment, Howard made it clear that Karmelo and his family were confident in the justice system and eager for a trial where the full story could be heard. He insisted that once all the evidence was based, the prosecution would not be able to eliminate reasonable doubt that Karmelo acted to protect himself. This line of defense has shaped much of the family's strategy. While prosecutors frame the stabbing as intentional and unnecessary, the defense continues to argue that Austin Metcalf may have been the aggressor and that Karmelo was forced into a life or death decision. That narrative has been reinforced by their push to suppress certain evidence and by their relentless attempts to discredit eyewitnesses, including the new student witness who recently testified. For the defense, undermining testimony is key. If jurors can be persuaded that confusion and chaos clouded what people saw that day, then Karmelo's claims of self-defense gain traction. Behind the scenes, the Anthony family has remained mostly private, speaking rarely to the media. In the courtroom, they sit close to their son, offering silent support. Yet, even in their silence, their presence is controversial. For some in the community, the Anthonys symbolize unwavering parental loyalty. For others, they represent denial, a refusal to acknowledge the pain their son caused by taking another teenager's life. The defense knows the stakes. A first-degree murder conviction could mean life in prison for Karmelo. That's why every word, every objection, and every cross-examination is aimed at creating cracks in the prosecution's case. Howard has reminded jurors that panic can distort memories, that witnesses are not infallible, and that the only fair outcome is one that recognizes the possibility of self-defense. In the end, the Anthony family's hope rests entirely on the ability of their defense team to reframe the stabbing not as a murder, but as a tragic misstep in a heated altercation. Whether that argument holds up against the mounting evidence and the emotional weight of the Metcalfs' loss remains to be seen. Behind the scenes of this trial is a calculated legal strategy, shaped from the very beginning by Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis and his team. From the moment Austin Metcalf's death shook the community, Willis made it clear that this case would not be rushed. Instead, investigators spent weeks gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses and analyzing physical findings before presenting their case to a grand jury. The grand jury process is often unseen by the public, but in this instance, it was a crucial step. Rather than immediately charging Karmelo Anthony with murder, prosecutors compiled their evidence, from witness accounts to forensic reports, and laid it out privately before a panel of citizens. This group had the task of deciding whether there was enough credible evidence to pursue a trial. When the indictment came down, it signaled that the evidence was not just speculative, but strong enough to withstand scrutiny in open court. Willis addressed the indictment carefully, recognizing the sensitivity of a case involving two teenagers in a school setting. In his statement, he called the stabbing a tragedy that shakes people to the core, and stressed that the justice system must move with steadiness and principle. His words were designed to calm a community demanding answers, while also reinforcing that due process, not public outrage, would drive the case forward. For the prosecution, the indictment was more than just a procedural milestone. It gave them leverage. With a first-degree murder charge confirmed, they could now argue from a position of strength, pressing the seriousness of the case at every turn. It also gave them time to build a narrative that frames Karmelo as not just a frightened teenager, but as someone who made a conscious choice that ended another boy's life. This deliberate approach reflects a broader strategy. Keep the focus on the facts, keep the process airtight, and ensure that when the trial comes, there are no cracks for the defense to exploit. In the eyes of the DA's office, it is not just about convicting Karmelo Anthony. It is about proving to the community that even in moments of raw emotion, justice can and will be served by the book. As the trial edges closer, one fact continues to hang heavy over the case. In Texas, 17-year-olds are considered adults in the criminal justice system. That legal distinction means Karmelo Anthony, who was still a high school student at the time of Austin Metcalf's death, is being tried not as a juvenile, but as a full adult facing a first-degree murder charge. For the prosecution, this reinforces the seriousness of the case. If convicted, Karmelo could serve anywhere from 5 years to life in prison. For the defense, it creates an uphill battle, knowing that the jury is being asked to weigh Karmelo's actions, not through the lens of immaturity, but through the standards of adult responsibility. The decision to try him as an adult has stirred debate far beyond Collin County. Parents, educators, and legal analysts have questioned whether a 17-year-old should carry the same legal weight as someone twice his age. Yet, under Texas law, there is little room for leniency. The state has long maintained that 17-year-olds are old enough to face adult consequences, a policy that makes this trial not only about one student's fatal decision, but also about the broader question of accountability for young offenders. Meanwhile, national media outlets have begun to pick up the story. The combination of a school setting, teenage lives cut short, and the courtroom drama of student witnesses and grieving families has made the case a lightning rod for public attention. The narrative is no longer just about Frisco, Texas. It's about how communities across America grapple with violence in schools, the blurred line between adolescence and adulthood, and the pursuit of justice, when children themselves are at the center. For the Metcalfs, the legal nuances mean little compared to the absence of their son. For the Anthonys, every detail underscores the terrifying reality that their child could spend the rest of his life behind bars. And, for the jury, the decision ahead is monumental. They will be asked to determine not just whether Karmelo Anthony is guilty of murder, but whether the justice system has the strength to deliver clarity in one of the most emotionally charged cases the community has ever faced.